Dressmakers! I'm Katherine Harris with Minerva, and today I wanted to share with you a sew-along on how to make the blouse from the Avid Seamstress, which just so happens to be one of the kits that we have available. I will link everything for this kit down below, as well as timestamps if you are struggling at a particular part in the pattern. So first I wanted to start off with what you will get in the kit and what you will need if you're going to make up this pattern. Now to start, you are going to need some fabric, and you will need about 2 meters, and in this kit we chose a viscose challis from Lady McElroy, which is beautiful and flowy. You really want something that is lightweight and has a decent amount of drape to it, because it will give a nice billowy feel to this blouse, which is what you're looking for. So the next thing that you're going to get is the pattern, and if you ordered the kit, it is going to be a paper pattern. Now the blouse pattern comes in UK sizes 6 through 22, and what that means is a bust measurement of 32.5 inches through to 48 inches, a waist measurement of 25 inches to 42 inches, and a hip measurement of 34.5 inches through to 51 inches. Now that being said, if you are outside of this size range, this blouse is meant to be a little more drapey and have that extra ease. So I think it's rather forgiving pattern in terms of fit because there isn't a lot of fitted pieces. In fact, the ease on this blouse goes in the bust anywhere from 2 inches on the smaller size scale, and on the upper end of that size scale up to 4 inches. And then on the waist, we do have a 13-inch ease built into the smaller size through to a 10.5-inch ease built in on that upper end of the size range. So you do have a great deal of flexibility within this blouse. The other thing that I really like about this is the fact that it is made to be incredibly comfortable. So there are no darts in here, and it just drapes so nicely, and part of that is due to the construction of the pattern as well as the fabric you select. And the kits we've put together have the perfect choice in fabric for this. It is light and airy, and really you could take this blouse into any season, whether that is spring and summer through to fall and winter, just depending on the patterns that you choose. Now, as I had mentioned, this is for a confident beginner. It does have a couple of things that will really test your skills if you are a new sewist, and that would be the button placket as well as the collar stand. That being said, I am going to walk you through everything you need to know about how to put this together. That being said, we also have an elasticated sleeve band, so no having to hem those sleeve cuffs or create button cuffs on here, and you don't have a yoke in this or darts, making this a very simple and quick sew to make. Next up for things that we require is going to be some interfacing, and we will also require some universal 70-10 needles, which are included in the kit, as well as some hemline buttons to go down the placket of our blouse. We also have a package of elastic, which will be used for the cuffs, and you also get some matching Gutermann polyester thread to whatever fabric you had selected for your kit. Now that we've got all of our supplies all ready, I thought we would start by stitching this all up. So let's get into it. So the first step is to select your size, and if you are between sizes, for example, your bust is one size and your hips are another size, you can actually grade between those sizes in choosing when you're drawing out your pattern, and just kind of like grade out to that larger or smaller size depending on where you're going so that it fits. Bear in mind what I had mentioned before, that this is a very forgiving pattern because it is made to fit looser, so you may not necessarily need to do that. Now, when you go to cut out your pieces, you also want to be aware of the direction of the fabric, especially if you have a directional print, so that you are not flipping your pattern pieces upside down. So just keep that in mind. And one other tip is to always pre-wash and dry your fabric in the manner in which you're going to launder that garment in the future use. So once we have everything all cut out, what I like to do is add in all of my interfacing and press that onto those pieces at the start. Even though the instructions sometimes tell you to do it at a later step, I like to do it when I cut things out just because it makes it a little easier. So I thought we would start with that and then we can get into the sewing. So the front bodice button stand. So with this, we are going to take the fusible interfacing and we are going to cut strips down along here, and you're going to want to cut 2 strips. So I am just using my quilting ruler to get some nice straight strips. That being said, you can easily use your shears to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure that the glue side is down, and using a silk organza pressing cloth, if you have one, press on that fusible interfacing to the front of that button placket. So just going along here, I'm making sure there are no wrinkles, and then I am just using a decent amount of steam to really get this pressed on. And once we have that in place, it should look like this. Next, we are going to serge or zigzag the shoulder seams, the underarm seams, and the side seams. So the only seams you are not doing are the hem as well as the neckline. And you're going to do the same thing on the sleeves, going to the sides as well as the top, leaving the hem unfinished. Now, once that is done, you just want to leave the collar stand. Next, I am going to use my Dritz Easy Hem because I can put my iron over top of it. It makes it really easy to get a nice good fold here. So I am just folding under the bottom of my button placket right along here, and I'm just folding it in that 1 centimeter, which is the seam allowance that we are using. And once I have that on, I am going to fold it back over itself so that I can get that 2 centimeters to form that button placket. So I use the Easy Hem to get it pressed in place, but I do find I get a more crisp press when I use the steam, which you can't use when you have the hot ruler on there. So I pull the hot ruler away and then blast it with a bit of steam. Next step, we are going to be stitching this placket down. So I like to work from the wrong side, which is the side that has the folded edge. You're going to do a couple of back stitches and then just follow along the edge of that folded placket line and stitch all the way down, back stitching at the bottom as well. You're going to repeat that for the other side, and you'll have a nice, perfectly straight placket along the front side here. And then I am just trimming up along the neckline, just some extra threads there. Next, you have on your pattern the placement for the buttons, but you could also use this fantastic tool that is used as a button gauge to be able to evenly space those buttons. I find I like this tool the best because I like to mark that center point of my button or the top or bottom of the button. In this case, I am marking the bottom of the button, and then I am going to go in and mark where that is on the other side. Now for the side seams and shoulder seams. So with this, we are going to place the front and back right sides together, and we are going to pin along the side seam. Next, I am just going to pin along the shoulder seam, matching up both of the edges first, and then just adding a couple of pins in the center just to hold everything nice and taut. Now I'm going to repeat this for the other side of the shirt, starting with that shoulder seam. And I'm going to speed this up just a little bit for you since we have already done the other side. Then we're going to do the side seam. So once again, I match the top and then the bottom, and then add the pins in place. So now you're starting to see why we had overlocked those seams in the first place. So next, we are going to stitch those side seams as well as the shoulder seams. So we're going to use a 1 centimeter seam allowance for this, which on my machine is just the edge of my presser foot with my needle in the center position. Backstitch both at the start and the end for all of the seams, and then head on over to your pressing board. Here I am using some steam to press those seams nice and open. And you're going to do that for both the shoulder seams as well as both side seams. And once it is done, your shirt is really starting to take form. Now for the sleeves. So with the sleeves, we are going to begin using our hot ruler, and we are going to fold up a 1 centimeter double fold hem. So there are 2 ways you can do this. So this way here, I am just folding up 1 centimeters right along the bottom, and then I am going to fold over yet again another 1 centimeter using my hot ruler as a guide. Now the second method you could do is you could fold under the 2 centimeters initially and then fold that bottom piece back in on itself. And I find that works a little bit better if you don't have a hot ruler to really make sure things are accurate. So once that is pressed, we're going to take the sleeve right sides together, and we're going to pin both at the top and the bottom, but unfold that double fold hem. We just want to make sure that we have that memory hem in place, but we are going to be stitching all the way down. So add in those pins and then head on over to your machine to stitch it up. So you can see I'm starting right at the end here. And I am making sure that I am stitching, and I do back stitch at the start and the end. And once again, I am using that 1 centimeter seam allowance. And once it is all complete, we are going to use our sleeve roll here, and I am just going to press that seam open just like we did on the sides of the shirt. And then as I get to the bottom, I find that memory hem and then I repress that in place. Now, next we are going to be doing the casing for the elasticized cuff. Now we need to create an opening to add in the elastic, and I do that over the seam allowance here, and I do about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Next, pull off the tray on your sewing machine so you just have that nice skinny arm. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to start at one of your marks, and you're going to stitch close to that folded edge to create this casing to insert our narrow elastic. Now don't forget to stop at that next marking that you made so that you still have that opening to insert the elastic. So you can see I've got that opening right there. Now the length of the elastic determines the size that you are using. That being said, if you are making it for yourself, you could also test out the comfortability of that elastic along your arm to see if it is comfortable. So I have just cut a length of elastic here, and then I'm going to go ahead and measure the amount that I need for my cuffs. And so just to remind you, I've got those lengths right there for you. You're going to cut 2 pieces of elastic, just like so. Next, grab 2 safety pins. I like to put one in horizontally and one in vertically. The horizontal one acts as a stopper so that the end doesn't go through the other end of the channel, and the one that is in line with the elastic is what I feed through the casing. Make sure you don't twist that elastic, and then place them together, overlapping one over the other, and then we are just going to zigzag that in place. So make sure you have a knit needle switched into here just because it makes it easier to stitch elastic, and zigzag back and forth over that end a couple of times so it's nice and secure. So now we can put that elastic back into the casing, and then we can finish top stitching. So right where we had left off before, place your needle down, and then you're going to take a single back stitch. So I go forward and then back, and then I continue to stitch that line. We don't want to go too crazy on those back stitches, otherwise you're going to see that from the right side. And we're going to do the same thing when we get to the end, is doing that single back stitch, and then clip your threads away. And your elasticated cuff is all completed. And what you can do is turn your sleeve right side out, and it should look like this. So next up, we are going to stitch 2 rows of gathering stitches. So set your machine length to the highest it will go. Mine happens to be 5 millimeters. Then you are going to stitch within the seam allowance, and so along that serged edge is where you're going to place the first row of stitches. Leave a tail, do not backstitch. We need to be able to gather these threads up, and then leave another tail. So now we have those 2 rows of gathering stitches. We can go in and gather the cap of our sleeve. So next we are going to take the blouse and we are going to place it right sides together with the sleeve, and we're going to match up the underside of the sleeve with the side seam of the blouse. I'm going to place a pin right in there because that's an important juncture. I'm also going to match up the shoulder seam with the notch on the top of the sleeve cap. And once we have all of those pins in place, you'll notice there are a couple other notches where we had started and stopped that gathering. You don't want to have any gathers in that area, so go ahead and add in the pins there. Next, we've got some gathering stitches, and this is where we want to adjust that fullness so that it fits the sleeve arm side, and we can really adjust the cap and gathers of that sleeve. And then I'm going in and adding in a decent amount of pins just to make sure everything is evenly distributed. And then I am going to repeat that for the other side of the sleeve here, just drawing in those gathering stitches until I get a nice volume. And then I'm going to distribute those gathers so that they are nice and even along that arm side. And then to hold everything in place, of course, place your pins in. And once that is complete, you're going to stitch around the edge with your 1 centimeter seam allowance. And this is what it will look like, and just repeat on the other side so that you have 2 arms set into your blouse. Now onto the collar. So with this, we are going to place our collar right sides together. And then we are going to pin right along this curved edge. So you want to do the exterior edge, so not the edge that is going to be attached to the blouse. And so I'm just adding all of these pins in here, and we will be stitching all the way along here. But before we do that, take out those 2 pins along the end, because there's an important step that we need to do. We need to fold over a very accurate 1 centimeter fold. So I'm just using my ruler to get that 1 centimeter fold, and you're only going to do one side, and that would be the under collar side of this, to make sure that we have this pressed down nicely. And then just go in with a pin just to secure that in place and ensure that both of those ends are there. Now we can stitch it in place. So once it is stitched, we just need to go in with our shears and just notch out those curves. So I'm just going in every inch or so and just notching this out. Now the next thing we're going to do is we need to press it. So I am just finger pressing this open right now, and then we are going to press this using a decent amount of steam. So making sure that everything is perfectly lined up, go in with your hot iron, and if you have a delicate fabric, do be sure to use a pressing cloth. I am not using one, just so you can see what I'm doing just a little bit better. So you can see that I have those ends still folded under. Now you're going to stay stitch that neckline, and then we are going to attach the collar to the neckline. So we are going to attach the piece that is not folded under, so that being the upper collar here, and we are just going to pin this in place, making sure that you're not catching the other side of that collar, which is the one that we had folded under. So here I'm just finding the center back of my garment because my chalk mark did come off, and there are notches that I had clipped into the collar based on the pattern markings so that I can find all of those notches. So I always match up my notches first, and then I go in and distribute the rest of the fabric. So I'm just going in here and adding in a ton of extra pins because we are doing this on a curve. We really want to make sure that we are nice and accurate when attaching this collar piece. And then we're going to head on over to the machine and stitch that with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Next, we are going to grade that seam down. So we're going to cut this fairly close to the stitching. And once that is done, we are going to flip it over and give it a good press. So when we do press this, we want to ensure that we are pressing up towards the collar. So that seam allowance is going to go upwards, and we want to make sure it's nice and flat. And once that is done, we are going to fold over the collar. And what I like to do is not do that at the pressing mat. I actually like to take it off and then use pins to hold it in place. Now it's key that you use glass head pins because they will melt in a following step if you are using plastic pins. So do get your glass head pins out. So I am just pinning this in place along that 1 centimeter fold, and then I am folding under that collar right just past that stitching line, and I'm putting my pins in vertically, and I've got the heads pointed out the top because I want the tips of the pins to be right along that fold line, which is where we are going to press it in a later step. So this is really important to make sure that this is accurate and that everything is sitting as it should. So once it is all pinned in place, the next thing you're going to do is you are going to press it. So take and use a decent amount of steam and give it a good press so it lies nice and flat, and this fabric presses like a dream. Now this next step is optional, but I find it to work quite well. What I do is I actually put my pins in horizontally along the line that I will be stitching, because we will be stitching from the right side. And then I flip it over just to double check the back to ensure that they are indeed going through the fold of that fabric and I'm not missing anything. This ensures that I get perfectly stitched collars every single time and I'm not missing anything. When I don't do this step, oftentimes I am going back and unpicking stitches to pick up little portions where I accidentally missed it. And then go ahead and top stitch that in place. So it should look like this. Now for the hem. So with the hem, you are going to do a 1 centimeter double fold hem. So this is the second variation on how you can do this double hem. You can fold over that 2 centimeters and just continue to do that for the length of the hem along the shirt. This gives a very accurate hemline because you don't have any fabric that is included in the turn of the cloth when you are doing this double fold hem. Next, I am matching up from the top of the button of the collar down to the bottom, and I want to make sure that the end of that hem on both sides is exact. So I am just making a minor adjustment, just a few millimeters to adjust that, because when you have it buttoned up, you are going to notice if it is off even just slightly. Then you're going to fold that centerpiece down towards that end, and I'm just pressing that in place. And we will continue doing that along the length of the shirt. Now this does add in 1 extra pressing step, but it is very accurate. And once we have finished that, then we can go back and then fold that hem again along that original hem. So you're folding it up a total of 2 centimeters in total, so 1 centimeter, and then folding it again that 1 centimeter. And once your hem is all completed, you could add some pins in here, but I find that this fabric presses so nicely, you don't really need to add many pins in to stitch this in place. And if you are not going to do pins, make sure you do pin the corners to make sure it stays nicely. I'm just adding in a very few pins, just going horizontally along this hemline, just so nothing shifts out of the way. And those corners are that key place where you don't want anything peeking out that shouldn't be peeking out. Then go ahead and stitch that following along that fold line. And once it's stitched, it should look just like this with a beautiful inside. Now for the buttonholes and the buttons. So with this, we are going to grab our package of buttons and we are going to grab out that seam gauge, just double check where we have that placement. Now with this, you want to make sure that you are drawing on those buttonholes. So I marked the center of the buttonholes earlier, and then I am just going to place my buttonhole here, and I am going to start, and mine happens to go backwards. I think vast majority of machines do go backwards. If you don't have a buttonhole foot, you could use a narrow zigzag stitch to do that. Next, I am using my buttonhole and chisel so that I can open this up. If you don't have a chisel set, you could use a seam ripper, but use that with caution. I have an experience cut through fabric in the past using that method, so I do tend to lean more on that chisel. Then I am just going to double check the placement of my buttonholes as well as where I'm going to place my buttons, and then putting that final spot just with chalk where I will be attaching all of those buttons. And then you can grab out your buttons and you can stitch them on either by hand, or in my case, I am going to use the machine because it is nice and fast, and it just goes in so nicely and is a lot more quickly than I could do by hand, though you don't get those fun fancy X's that you do when you do stitch them on by hand. And we have now completed the shirt, but what I like to do, a nice little hack with any sort of button shirt, I like to use fray check and do it on the back side of the button placket, right along all of the buttonholes, as well as along the back side of each of the buttons. This really helps to hold those buttons in place so you don't lose any buttons. Now for the reveal.
Let it go, what's the use in holding on? Can we find a way where we could spend some time alone? You know where to find me, you know which way to go. As long as you love me, we'll be singing all night.
Okay guys, time to give yourself a pat on the back because we are all done our blouse from the Avid Seamstress. This is a great wardrobe basic that is quick to whip up as well as being really versatile. So you can really dress it up by pairing it with a pair of smart trousers or a pencil skirt, or dress it down like I did by pairing it with a pair of jeans. Now, if you're wondering, the jeans that I have in my reveal here happen to be the ginger jeans, which we just so happen to also have a kit for, which we will link in the description down below. And if you would like a sew along on those, we do have that, which I will link as well below. Now, if you want to catch any of the new kits that we release, just follow hashtag Minerva Kits. And if you want to catch any of the sew-alongs and videos that we have posted, just follow hashtag Minerva TV and hashtag sew-along. And if you are interested in checking out my profile here on Minerva, you can find me at Sheer Stitchery, and I will leave a link to my profile there. And if you haven't created a profile yourself here on Minerva, well, do so, because you can share all your beautiful makes. And if you have any questions about making this blouse or even comments, let me know in the comments down below and we will be sure to get back to you as soon as we're able. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.